Hello, and welcome to the Tonic Accord. I don't know about you guys, but it seems like in this current political landscape, each podcast, news source, or opinion comes with a spin. Sometimes the spin takes you to the far left, other times the far right. Sometimes you don't even know that the spin is there, but in general, there seems to be a lack of a moderate voice in the media and in politics. Here at the Tonic Accord, we are truly hoping to help the middle get a voice, and to provide people with a centered and balanced message. A tonic chord is a very important reference in many forms of music. It describes two extreme notes, a high and a low, resonating simultaneously. In this chord, the addition of the middle note helps anchor down the sound, and it creates somewhat of a harmony and agreement between the other, more extreme notes. This can be a good metaphor for the importance of cooperation and discussion in politics. A country needs a moderate and sensible center to bring the outer extremes together. Good harmony is not only important for everyone, but it is better for the social fabric. And with that, let's get after it.
Hello, welcome to episode 4 of the Tonic Accord podcast. Today we will be covering bureaucracy, bailouts, and a little bit of Brexit. So strap in, guys, and get ready. I'm your co-host, Drew Nepoli, and again, I work in political media, and I'm here with Alex Capitco.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back. Boy, we have a lot to talk about this week, don't we, Drew?
Sure do. A lot of cobwebs to clear.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about what to do with this episode, and it was like, do we cut any out? Do we add more? It's just like the constant news cycle internationally and domestically just is nonstop. Like, I bet I could stay up all night and just think of other stuff to talk about.
Definitely. I think I think for the majority of our episodes we want to cover like one or two topics, but with just the amount of stuff going on right now, I feel like every now and then in our episodic series, guys, we are going to cover we're going to have like a housekeeping episode to cover up, all the 24-hour news cycle that's going so crazy. And so this is one of those. So we have a lot to catch up on. Real quickly, some of the things we're going to go over is the Mueller hearing. What we think about the upcoming Democratic debates, the current government actions regarding the trade war and issues with farmers that we'll talk about in more detail, and maybe sprinkle in a little bit of Brexit for dessert. So how about we get started with the Mueller hearing? What did you think? First impressions, Alex.
I have to say I'm almost sick of hearing from CNN and Fox News about the Mueller reports and then the hearing. I mean, it's kind of become almost vampire-like, all the news I've heard from it, because if you want to be honest, I think both sides accomplished what they wanted to from it. Yeah, like I think a lot of people hoped that this hearing was going to have fireworks and emotion like that of James Comey. And to me, I think it kind of felt flat. I think people pretty much have already developed their own opinion on this. And all this was just kind of getting in your trenches on which side you were on. What about your thoughts?
I think that's a good observation, right? Like, it definitely wasn't some like bombshell thing that's gonna flip a lot of the country. I think it was just firing up people's bases. So the left that wants to see Trump impeached or at least face punishment for some of the things that he's done in the report, they got fired up because they were like, this is our chance to bring it to light. I think on the Republican side, the base that wanted to portray Mueller as like, or like bring up the Steele dossier and question the authenticity of the origins of the investigation. They did that, and they probably fired up their own base. Obviously, in my opinion, Trump was gonna claim victory no matter what happens, and that's exactly what he did. Right after his death, he said, total exoneration. This is over. It's done. There's another witch hunt. Like he did his usual rounds on Twitter, to be expected. It did seem like a whole lot of the same, and I don't think much is going to happen now.
No.
Again, in the impeachment process, even if it goes through the House, it's just never going to get through the Senate. So the idea of the idea that this would end up leading to some impeachment, I mean, I just don't see the Senate doing that at all. And so we're just kind of back to square one of like, it's basically the same thing of after the report first came out. Nothing new was really revealed. I think the only one new thing that was interesting that was kind of quote unquote revealed was when Mueller was asked whether or not, like the president can be indicted for a crime once he leaves office. And he replied, yes, he can. So
Right.
that was interesting. So it might still be the kind of thing where people might tout the idea that even when Trump is out of office, they still want to indict him and put him in charge of him. And if I was Donald Trump, that would scare the bejesus out of me. Um, so I don't know. Maybe that's why he went on a Twitter tirade. Maybe he doesn't care. But other than that, nothing really new.
Yeah, see, I'm not freaking out about that. I think you're right. It was a big revelation. Mueller, in the most simple terms possible, said yes, we can go forward with this once he's out of office. But to me, I'm really not. I guess I'm not reacting the same way a lot of Democrats are about it, because it was just a question: can you do it? It
Right.
wasn't will you.
It's
And for
true.
me, I think that, I mean, going a little bit off of that, I kind of have two separate opinions on the report and the hearing in general. Like, basically, I don't agree with Democrats. I don't think Trump actually colluded with Russia. I think that he wanted to, and he's a morally questionable man. But I think that most Americans, Republicans and Democrats, know that. I think Republicans have decided that, well, the economy's okay. We're going to turn our back on that. And so the thing is, I don't know if I think that this collusion thing is at best possible, but not there's not much else you can do with that. But on the other hand, I agree with Democrats in their push and fear of Russian interference. And I think that was, for me, the most important part of this was Mueller's true fear about Russian interference currently happening.
Yeah, I mean, Mueller even said it himself that, it was like a threat to our democracy that like we haven't faced before. So I think that's a big takeaway, right? Like, I think a lot of the focus, Democrats and Republicans were focused so much on Trump, how to make
Right.
Trump look bad. And it's like, you know what, man? Like, Trump obviously enjoyed the help. He wasn't colluding. I agree, he wasn't colluding. The other issue in the report is the obstruction of justice, but we'll talk about it in a second. But the
Right. Right.
most important thing is that the Russian government has had a full scale, large scale attempt and effective attempt at influencing elections and are continuing to do so and will do so in 2020. And the fact that Democrats and Republicans were kind of just like brushing that aside to focus on Trump to get like a headline, it's a shame. And especially
Yeah.
Republicans where, they're trying to, again, they're defending Trump so much, but it's like this should be a bipartisan thing, that our democracy is attacked by a foreign government.
Yeah, and
And
really quick, I actually just wanted to read. I wrote down the quote of what Mueller said about it, because for anyone who didn't watch, I think it's kind of alarming. In quotes, Mueller said, "Over the course of my career, I've seen a number of challenges to our democracy. The Russian government's efforts to interfere in our election is amongst the most serious. It wasn't a single attempt. They're doing it as we sit here, and they expect to do it during the next campaign."
yeah, they are actively working on it. That should be the focus, right? That should be the first priority of both sides. Is like, that's super serious. And what have we had to show for it? Like, I keep hearing about security bills getting blocked by Mitch McConnell.
Yeah,
Have you had any credit to that? I mean, is that true or?
yeah. As he's now been deemed by some people on the left, Moscow Mitch. Um, basically, it's actually a really flawed logic, in my opinion. It's kind of a straw man that I don't think will last up. But basically, they're saying that they don't want the federal government to be involved in election laws because each state's election is different. And I understand where they're coming from as someone that is more interested in states than the federal government. But at the same time, national elections are a federal issue, and we need something that encompasses every state. And so I think the logic is just complete BS, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I think it's like a workaround, right? But it's like, the other argument is like, look, like, I get that states have to run their own elections, but this is a national security threat. Like, at the end of the day,
Right.
it's a national security threat, and that's the job of the federal government to handle national security threats.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly. Great point.
and so it might be one of those things where you don't have the government exactly telling, like they're not demanding stuff from like changes in the elections in the states, but they have like a committee that works with states to ensure security and to, you know what I mean, to give them the data and the intelligence to have the technologies to have safer elections. It has to be something like
Right.
that, but it has to be soon. I mean, that's the problem is like if it's currently going on and it's been going on for 3 years now, we have
Yeah.
to do this. We have to do something now. And man, I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately.
Well, I think you said the key word there, national security. And I think you're correct. I think we're looking at this as a bipartisan federalism versus states' rights, but that is not how it should be looked at. This is a national security crisis. And the way I heard someone compare it, I'm probably going to butcher this a little bit, was that if we go to war with someone, you don't expect, say, Mississippi or California to be running the front on how to deal with this crisis. It's the federal government's job. It's Congress's job.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's disappointing to see from everyone that there was way more focus on trying to get a headline related to Trump
Right.
than
And so, okay, so yeah, I mean, sorry to interrupt. To keep this moving, I want to get into the political side of it,
Mhm.
the left versus right side of this. I I want to bring up a Republican talking point really quick. Okay.
Sure.
Um, and I think there's a little bit of merit to it. I don't buy it all the way, but I can understand the reasoning behind it. I've spoken with many conservative friends, and many conservative talk shows have also said it. Is that this investigation did one thing very poorly for Democrats? Is it showed that Mueller didn't seem to be fully involved with the report. It did. He really struggled to know specifics, and I understand that it's a high stressful hearing. He has issues hearing because of everyone speaking at you from different angles. Um, but there were certain questions that he should have answered, but he didn't seem to have the knowledge to do so. And I think it does bring up the question: is Andrew Weissman one of the prosecutors that helped him in the case? Obviously, he worked for the DOJ before and was a clear Trump critic. There is a lot of people that believe that Weissman maybe was the man that spearheaded the investigation, and Mueller was just the figurehead.
I mean, I wish there was like if there's a way to verify that, like to see like how much Mueller was a part of the actual like release of the report and the writing of it. I'm interested in that too. I don't think that I still think he. I mean, I still think he headed it. I don't. I would love to verify, right, to put that claim to bed, but I think that it was a long hearing. He's an old man.
Yeah.
Like I think he just had some hearing issues, and he obviously played his cards really close to the chest, right? Even the times he was answering, it was just true, not true. And a lot of times, he came across questions where it's like I can't answer that, um, or it would be very brief about like Peter Starzuk or Strzok. I don't know how to say his name, but
I think it's Struck. I'm not
Strzok.
100% sure.
He would just be like, we hired based off ability, and then he was removed after the issue with texts. Like it was very direct. I think he's playing his cards close to chest. One, because that's just who he is, right? He's just that kind of investigator, and then two, there's currently pending cases involving guys like Roger Stone and others
Right.
that he doesn't want to reveal the information for yet on the public stage. So I don't get anything like insidious from it. But if that's the concern of like who was really leading the investigation, yeah, let's find out. I don't see why there's no reason not to like pursue that. It's just as long as we agree that if Mueller was heading it, then Mueller was heading it.
Right. And I mean, just the tick and tack of it, though, like, I guess I kind of do feel that Mueller is. You're right. He's old, and it was a stressful hearing, and it was very clear that he wasn't himself. I think I saw a hearing of him in 2007, and he seemed much more on top of it. Obviously, 12 years is going to change a lot, but when there are specifics, and he's asked about him, and he's supposed to be the man that doctored this report, I think it does bring into question. Why can't he? I don't know about you. Like, it's a question, but like, if you wrote a report in school, I don't know, say your teacher asked you a specific on it, I would hope that you would probably be able to remember it. You know what I mean? If you
Sure,
wrote it.
sure. But I mean, he's not. I mean, we know he's not the only one that wrote it, right? He had a team of what was it, 12 or 15 lawyers or 20 something? Let me confirm that actually. How large was his investigation group?
think it was actually bigger than that, to be honest. But
Well, at least the lawyers. I mean, he
right,
probably
right.
used the help of special counsel investigation. Well, anyway, while I'm trying to find this number, I think that you know, I bet you if you ask some of these congressmen and women about their bills that they've quote unquote written about the specifics, they couldn't come up with it either because it's written by a lot of interns and it changes over time and they probably don't remember every little detail. So I don't
Right.
blame them for not remembering little details. Um, I don't know. I mean, I don't blame him for that. But you're right though. His performance was kind of lackluster, and it wasn't like this fiery, really
Right.
well prepared. It was very like seemed very blasé, very straight to the point. You could tell he didn't want to be there. I mean, you could tell. Okay, so his prosecution team was 15 attorneys.
Okay. Okay. Good for you.
So 15 attorneys writing over 400 pages. I'm sure there was stuff that he's not going to remember by heart.
Right.
But yes, there was a lot of things that he just didn't answer that. I can see why people would be frustrated that he wasn't answering some things, especially on the
Yeah.
Republican side. If the Republicans do have concerns about potential bias, and he kind of shuts them down, that would raise more concern. So
Right. And I understand to a certain extent the irritation on the right, because I think a lot of Trump voters, let's throw his morals out the window for a second, is that I think a lot of voters felt like basically the other side was trying to get rid of Trump since day one. And then going off of that, I think that if basically, yeah, so okay, 15 prosecutors, and plus this Strzok Lisa Page memo or what email correspondence, I think a lot of them do get this idea that the Justice Department and the FBI want to get rid of Trump. It's not a fair investigation. And then when they, get this idea that there's this Andrew Weissman guy and Mueller doesn't know some specifics, I think it just feeds fuel to the fire that maybe there were alternative motives. And that's why I'm okay with William Barr looking into it. I think for the better of everything, it's okay to do that.
I agree. I mean, like I don't I'm not against looking into it. I think trust but verify is what
Uh-huh.
Reagan said, and I guess I watched HBO Chernobyl, and in that show they said the Russians said it first. But that's besides the point. But trust but verify, right? Like I'm okay with looking into that, but I also think that it's being skewed so much to just like to avoid talking about what the facts are, and the facts are
Good
is
point.
they found tons of evidence that the Russians were getting involved with Americans, right? I mean, there was charges and people in jail currently due to this investigation. So it's not like it was all smoke and mirrors with nothing to show for it. There's serious things to show for it. So sure, if we want to investigate some biases, sure, absolutely, let's do that. We also need to investigate what we found in the report. And
Right.
sadly, the Democrats want to do that one thing, and the Republicans want to do another thing, and I don't think anything's going to get done. I don't think that there'll be a really serious investigation into Mueller and the bias of the team, and I definitely don't think that there's going to be a serious investigation into how we can combat Russian election hacking. And it's a shame because this, I think, is one of the biggest problems that we're facing as a nation, and so much focus is on how to figure out how to impeach Trump, and Trump getting impeached is just not going to happen.
No. No, I completely agree. Really quick before we move on, obstruction of justice. We should probably just touch on that. I know you mentioned it earlier. What do you think?
I think it's serious. I think it's serious because I think the one big thing that Mueller was asked about is, is it still considered a crime to obstruct justice even if it was unsuccessful? And he said yes. And so when you have Trump ordering people to do things, quote unquote, crazy shit, and people are denying it and saying like I'm not going to do that, but he still attempted to, then that's obstruction of justice. So unfortunately, the current political climate, nothing's going to get done about it due to the Senate. But I think in a perfect world, this is grounds for some serious, it is an impeachable offense in my opinion. I just don't see the political reality of that happening. But it's on the board of impeachable offense in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we're both on the same page there. I think it's not a good way to go about affairs, and you're right. Even though he wasn't successful, he intended it, and intention to me is the same. It's like, I don't know, if you're trying to kill someone. I mean, obviously you don't go to prison if you intended to kill someone unless there's extreme circumstances. But I think intent is just as important as committing the crime. And
Yeah, if you hire a hitman and he doesn't go through with it, you still hired a hitman, and that's illegal.
yeah,
I mean, that's an
yeah,
extreme case, right? I'm not talking about hiring a hitman, but like it's still right. Like even if you're like, oh, he didn't go through with it, like yeah, but you still paid him to kill someone, so that's a felony. So yeah, I think it's unfortunate because like I said, nothing's gonna happen, but I just hope that people realize that like how the gravity of what obstruction of justice means.
well, yeah. I mean, I wrote an article on our Tonic Accord website about this impeachment, and it's true. I mean, the founding fathers didn't put impeachment as an option because they wanted it to go with, reactionary change. It's a pragmatic approach to getting rid of someone who is not truly meant to be in office. And I think for that reason, even though, yes, I think I agree with you, you kind of have to wonder, would it actually be productive to start impeaching him now? I think we have to impeach him with the voting box. And yeah, I mean, I just think it would be almost counterproductive at this point.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly what's going on in Nancy Pelosi's mind. And now we can kind of shift over to Democratic strategy, maybe touch on the
Yeah,
debates. But right before we do
definitely.
that, kind of related is that Nancy Pelosi knows that impeachment it's not going to work. It's not going to get through the
Yeah,
Senate. You need 2/3, not even a majority. You need 2/3 of the Senate to fully impeach a president, and so
yeah,
that's not going to happen. And so now she has to wonder: is it worth the headlines and the political and all the fighting about it? Like it will going forward with an impeachment process dead in the water be politically beneficial or not? And I don't think it will be. And so she has to convince those in her party, like the squad, that are really adamant about starting the process. She has to try and convince them that, hey, look, like this is not going to work, and that might actually hurt us in the election, and the election is where we need to win. That's why Nancy Pelosi just recently had a closed door meeting with AOC, and they
right.
just said it was a productive meeting. I guarantee you, I would bet money on the fact that Nancy Pelosi had to talk with her. Like, we need to figure out how to strategize together so we can win this election, because this impeachment thing's not going to work.
Yeah. And I applaud Nancy Pelosi for that because I think right now they need to come together if they want any hope. And I mean, I get it. Young people do not like Trump and they want him out of there. But most independents, I think it was only like 40% of independents support impeachment. And if we keep scaring away independents,
That's it.
I think the answer's out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, speaking of independents and debates, let's just touch on the debate, yeah?
Absolutely. So we have Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and Joe Biden in another debate together. I think that's going to be interesting. They have been taking shots at each other, and Joe Biden just recently, earlier this weekend, quoted as saying that he's not going to play nice in the next election anymore.
Yeah. But then he gave no specifics when asked how he's going to do that. He said, "Let's see."
Let's see.
I don't know. I don't know what that means. I don't know if you do, but I'm not really sure, man.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because it seems out of his character. I mean, well, he's done the things where he says he wants to punch Trump in the face on Twitter, kind of stupid, right? So like
Yeah.
he has those moments, but like you can't say that about Kamala Harris.
Oof.
So
Oof.
it'll be interesting to see how he tactfully attacks his opponents without seeming like angry uncle or something. Like he has a serious PR issue, so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and for me, the other battle that I'm curious about is Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders.
Right.
I kind of wonder, basically, since Sanders and Warren have a very similar group of supporters and pretty similar policy ideas, I just kind of wonder if in this debate they will start going after each other, or if they kind of want to start working more together against Joe Biden. Obviously, they're not going to be in the same debate, but it would be interesting because notice they are in the same debate. Night one,
Yes.
Bernie and Elizabeth. That's interesting.
Yeah, they're gonna have to differentiate themselves from the other because right now they honestly seem like an old couple that's married, as far as their policy plans. So it'll be interesting to think like Elizabeth Warren doesn't strike me as the kind of candidate that would go for the throat, especially against someone that she probably respects like Bernie Sanders. But at a
Right.
certain point, she's gonna have to because she's trailing him like ever so slightly. She's a little bit behind him, and so you know I don't know. I'm honestly intrigued to see how these super quote unquote respectful candidates for most of their time are going to actually have to start throwing punches.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Who do you think has a chance to break into the top five, and who do you think is just going to fall flat and be gone?
I mean, as I've said it for a while, I've always been a Pete Buttigieg fan. Um, Unfortunately, he's kind of just pulled a little bit out of that main group, and I still think that he's the smartest guy in the room and the most moderate and least divisive in the way he speaks.
Yes.
And so I hope that he gets a chance. I also like Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard, but unfortunately, I think Andrew Yang got about 2 minutes in the entire debate, and Tulsi Gabbard was kind of singled out for her religious upbringing. And so, I really, unfortunately, with where the party's going right now, I don't really see anyone standing out. I just don't know if the system with this many candidates is meant to have anyone stand out.
Yeah. It does seem like a lot of those standout moments can kind of be steered to by the cable company, like the cable news networks. You
Right.
know what I mean? It definitely, like, it was obvious that Andrew Yang got way less time than someone like a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren or a Kamala Harris on any of the debates in the last round. I mean,
Right.
it was just obvious. It's obvious that it wasn't fair. It wasn't equal time at all. So then you're gonna have these candidates elbowing each other to get that time. So I think that if Andrew Yang doesn't have a big moment in this next round, he's done.
Yeah, me
He
too.
needs to get on the board now, or else it's too late. I
and
think
and it's too bad because he Andrew Yang is bringing up, in my opinion, I don't totally agree with universal basic income, but I think he's addressing an issue and probably a reason why a lot of middle America voters went for Trump. People are losing their jobs, and there's a lot of dying industries in the United States, and
yes,
we don't talk about that enough.
Andrew Yang has a really interesting perspective, and he's really level-headed and calm. Right, like he's very calm and level-headed, and like UBI again, like UBI, the way he has it, the freedom dividend, it does sound strange to me as well. But at least that he really believes in it, and he has ideas that he's thinking outside the box. He's not just bandwagoning on a popular, a popular idea right now. You can tell that he really thinks through his ideas, in the end. So yeah, I have respect for Andrew Yang, but he's not good as far as like taking on prosecutors and politicians that are really good at rhetoric. He's not good with that rhetoric. He's very like, he's good on a one-on-one interview, but he doesn't seem to thrive in a debate.
No, well said. So who do you think does the worst? Who do you think says adios after this debate?
I mean, I think like the bottom tier, like Hickenlooper, Bullock, even Bill De Blasio. Bill De Blasio makes a lot of enemies really quick. I mean, so if he doesn't have a good moment too, I think he might drop out. He has a little bit more money in his pocket, so he might hang around a little bit longer. But yeah, I honestly hope that a bunch of people drop out anyway, just to make it just to make it easier to cover and to focus more on some serious candidates.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And Bill De Blasio, I really can't stand the guy, to be completely honest. There's just something really unlikable and combative about him. And I mean, he has one of the most leftist platforms as well. And so I think it's better if he's out of there. I personally, I would also like to see Julian Castro gone. I know he's too popular for that. Jay Inslee should probably go. Um,
Yeah.
I actually Michael Bennett might be my favorite candidate running, but he also should probably go. Unfortunately,
Well, we also gotta say R.I.P. to Eric Swalwell, the the first guy that at least was on the debate stage level to officially drop out. Um, so yeah, peace out, buddy. He was the youngest candidate on the board. He had his one big moment where he did that thing of like, you said, I know someone that said pass the torch to the next generation. That person was Joe Biden. Ha ha ha. Very cheesy. You're gone. See ya.
yeah. Ironically, the youngest guy who called out Joe Biden's the first gone. So obviously something's working with the older ones.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I'm glad to see him go personally.
Here's
Didn't find much to agree.
Well, I mean, he especially since he's irrelevant now. It doesn't matter. But one quick thing is, I think one of the main reasons was he tried to make gun legislation the main issue, and it's just not. The main issues right now are immigration and healthcare. So if you don't
Yeah,
come swinging with those, if you come with some left stuff with like gun regulation, which debating about that aside, it's just not that popular of an issue right now. It's just like, dude, it's no one cares about that right now, honestly. So See ya.
Yeah. So I think we're going to have to wait and see. I'm sure next Sunday we'll have hopefully a lot to say. I hope there's some good discussion, and I do hope that they keep in mind that a lot of the people that watch the most debates and the most news are middle America older voters. I
Yeah.
hope they remember that a lot of millennials don't watch this stuff. And I
Yeah.
hope they remember that.
Yeah. You don't have to patronize millennials or Spanish speaking people by like saying like Pokemon Go to the polls or starting off your thing in Spanish. Like, just stop patronizing people. Just speak to America.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. With that, let's talk about Middle America.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's
So
talk.
do you want to talk to sorry, do you want to talk about that farm bill?
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's go. I have it up here. Um, wait, hold on. Now I'm getting some stupid ad. Well, anyway, the New York Times reported that the Trump is rolling out a farm aid to soy farmers and soy growers in an effort to combat the negative effects from the trade war. And I was looking at about a $16 billion farm bailout. So again, first impressions. What do you think about this?
Well, so I mean, I think this actually goes on what we talked about last week. It's become a circular reasoning scenario, basically, where okay, we have tariffs on goods, which are affecting farmers, and now we need to bail out the farmers because soybeans are down extremely high. And I mean, I don't think this plan, just to start off swinging, is very popular with the right or the left. Chuck Grassley, an Iowa Republican, told reporters Wednesday that the White House should have been more cautious about the timing of announcing this. And I think this is actually really important because right during this time of year, farmers want to make decisions on how many acres of corn and soybeans to plant.
Mm.
And so basically, because the government is telling them it's for soybeans, which one do you think they're going to go forward with doing? So instead of watching the market and seeing, okay, do we need higher yields in corn or soybeans or whatever else? Instead, it's pretty much the government telling you, well, we're going to subsidize soybeans, so you should go down this road no matter what. And so it's really bad economics and bad politics as well.
Yeah, it's well intentioned but poorly executed. It seems, again, I think if if we were more frank about what a trade war is and not this whole idea that these tariffs will pay for themselves, it's just a stupid idea. But
Yeah.
if we were more honest about like, look, we're gonna take a hit. If we had this plan earlier, like if he had this plan in 2017 of like we're gonna impose tariffs on China for a short period of time to get them to the negotiating table, during which that time we will provide some subsidies to keep farmers afloat before they have to plan their crop, then I would be more okay with this. Like the overall idea is not too terrible as long as it's a short term thing to counteract a trade war where you're bringing China to the table. Then you bring China to the table, figure it out, and then you eliminate the subsidies and open up the markets again. Right? That's the perfect scenario. And it's not. It looks like it's not ending up like that because there isn't really. We don't really know. I mean, we're kind of kept in the dark of how much China is at the negotiating table. We don't see an end in sight. And like you said, it's a poorly planned timing of this bailout. Um, and I don't know. Yeah. It just seems like trying to dig ourselves out of a hole by digging farther down.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like, yeah, I mean, I think you said it well. Is that if this was all part of the plan and there was a start and end date, I think a lot of people could be behind this. But when you're subsidizing an industry that you have killed because of your trade war, sorry, I don't want to say killed, but an industry
Negatively,
that
yeah.
you've truly weakened by your own trade war, and then you're trying to dictate what farmers grow because you're only subsidizing certain parts. I think it's just detrimental, and I don't really see how this wins. I mean, I guess Trump could potentially use it as a victory lap, saying, well, look, we had this trade war, but all these soybean farmers that we were saying were getting hurt, look, they got this big bailout. But now what happens when, I don't know, corn farmers or corn surplus goes down or other farmers are hurt now? Because I mean, we're just addressing one side, but now we might even be digging a bigger hole in other sectors of the farming industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and like again, it's also like the strange way of justifying it. Like, it doesn't feel like everyone's on the same page, because it says here that the New York Times reported that the president claimed that the revenue collected from tariffs on $250 billion in Chinese goods will be enough to cover the cost of the bailout. And I just don't buy that. Like this idea that, because he said this about so many things, like Mexico will cover the cost of the wall. Well, that's not true. You know what I mean? And these tariffs will cover the cost. Like these tariffs will pay for themselves. And it's like that doesn't make any sense in my head. And especially now that, we've cut taxes and we're raising government spending, and now we're doing more bailouts. It seems very counter-conservative and just honestly counter-economical. Like everything just seems like backwards. We talked about this last week, of how the economic policy just seems like it's backwards.
Totally. Totally. I mean, it seems just like we're ignoring long-term issues for just a short-term soundbite, to be completely honest. And
Right.
I mean, it's just like, I mean, I've always said this, is like, as someone that likes conservative economics, I've never seen Trump as even being close to any of that. I mean, spend, 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 carte blanche. I mean, I think that's how he ran his business too, and
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of kills me to see that, yeah, we're justifying fiscal responsibility by just destroying the budget. And this is, I mean, yeah, you're right. This farm bailout, it's ill-timed. I think you're right. I think there's probably not truth involved in actually the intentions or where the money's coming from. And also, it's just going to be bad for the agricultural and entire economy, I think.
Yeah, because what happens if you really sever ties with China? Do you have to keep bailing them out? How are we going to bail them out 18 billion a year until what? Until the industry dies, or until we figure something out with China? Let's say we figure something out with China and they're like, "Okay, we're back at the table. We'll reduce tariffs, but we've already been buying soy from Vietnam for 2 years, so we're going to keep doing that." So even if the trade war ends, these soy farmers still don't have the same kind of market share that they had before. There's a lot of factors of like, do we have to increase the bailout over time? Like it does seem like it seems like a quick reaction to like, well, the farmers are hurting, so just bail them out. And it's like there's a lot more implications here. And I also, like you mentioned, intention. I also think that the part of this is political. I think part of this is, before I get too unpopular, I need to just a bailout so I can say I'm on the farmer's side and get my base fired up again. I mean, everything's
Very, very good
political.
point.
Everyone does that, and that's nothing new. But it is just a factor.
Yes, that's a really good point. I just think, I mean, yes, you're right. Everything's always been political, but I like it when, left or right, there's someone in the room who has the balls to stand up to the president and say, "Yo, I have a master's in economics from the London School of Economics, and this is just BS. This is not going to
Yeah,
work."
this is the opposite of what we've learned through history about, like, like ISI and all these, import subsidized industrialization. Like we've seen this time and time and again, where it's like this. You can't just have government prop up industries that are failing, because
No.
they'll continue to fail regardless of how much money you throw at them.
Well, ironically, this is kind of a socialist, almost leaning on communist policy. Usually, like, this is nothing even close to a democratic or conservative policy. This
No,
is the opposite.
yeah, and the only reason that I think like something like this um could have been done better is like, because I get it, like if you're gonna have a trade war and people are gonna suffer, then you need to take care of those people that are suffering, because
Yeah.
it's not like it was everyone's choice, and the farmers are suffering greatly, but it's gonna turn into propping up an industry that is struggling and might continue to struggle even when this trade war, quote unquote, ends.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. But
Good politics, bad economics.
yes, yes, isn't that is a theme amongst both parties? I feel
I think so.
there's a lot of good politics and bad economics.
Well, so the U.S. News and World Report reported that the Democratic controlled House on Thursday passed bipartisan debt and budget legislation to permit the Treasury to issue bonds to pay the government's bills and lock in place recent budget claims for both the Pentagon and domestic agencies. And it was passed by a 284 to 149 vote, and it would head off another politically dangerous government appropriations bill and shutdown. And so the Senate is scheduled to approve the bill next week. Thoughts?
Well, it does seem like it was a bipartisan agreement, a rare moment of agreement between the two sides of the House. And I have a quote right here from Democrat from Kentucky, John Yarmouth. He says, "Everyone's motives aligned at the right time." And he's the chairman of the House Budget Committee. So that's a good thing, right? Overall, like as far as between a government shutdown again or this, I would want to take this. But it does raise concerns. It does make me raise concerns of how much we are spending and how we're raising the deficit ceiling while we are cutting taxes. It just seems like it's a bubble that's going to pop maybe 8 or 10 years down the road.
Yeah, and this is how Republicans are justifying it. Kay Granger of Texas, the top Republican on the Appropriations Committee, this is all he could say was the alternatives are very, very bad. So just because the alternatives are very, very bad, it doesn't always mean the solution's great.
Yes.
And I mean, there are no new steps to curb spending elsewhere in the budget. And so I'm just terrified about our national debt and where it's headed.
Yeah, we need to start cutting things somewhere. If we are to have such less revenue from taxes now, then we have to cut spending somewhere. That's the
Yeah.
idea, right? If you want to cut taxes, you cut spending. If you raise taxes, you can raise spending. But we're doing the inverse, and it's very strange. But I don't know. I think time and time and again throughout history, especially the last 30 years, we've constantly seen Congress kick the can down the road. As long as we can agree to a budget now, then we can worry about the ever increasing deficit and debt, overall debt, that we're accruing.
Oh,
And
totally.
you know, it's worrying. It's definitely worrying.
I mean, and I think to kind of bash my, I guess, more side of the aisle is that, I mean, I truly think the GOP has just been misleading people for a long time. Like on the campaign trail, it's cut taxes, build the military, less spending. But I mean, when it's crunch time, I don't think we see that, do we?
No, and especially since Obamacare repeals were unsuccessful. Even the attempts to cut back on certain things were just unsuccessful, and it's politically difficult. I mean, especially healthcare. It is hard
Oh yeah.
to get away with cutting people's healthcare and stay in office. And so
Yeah.
it's like that. It's like that old logic, right? It's like once you give people something, it's really hard to take it back. And so it's going to be very difficult to cut spending, but we're going to have to do it at some point. Or we're going to have to increase the tax revenue. And raising taxes is not politically viable either. People hate
Yeah.
raising taxes, so we've almost caught ourselves in this conundrum where either way out, either less spending or more taxes, is going to be hard to pass.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it just seems like both sides just keep pushing the elephant out of the room for another year.
Right.
I mean, and I mean, let's look at Puerto Rico, for example. They have soaring debt. Um, they've defaulted on their debt so many times. And I mean, I know they're obviously, they're not comparable to the United States in size or economic might. But I think they are actually a very scary example of what happens when you keep defaulting on your debt. They're kind of a minuscule, small example. They're a microcosm, you could say, of what happens is that eventually you have to file and get out of it. And I mean, obviously we have a lot difference, but with China and Japan owning most of our debt and with us continuing spending, I think that if not our generation, the next one is going to see some serious differences in coverage, and it's worrying.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm not so much worried about like a foreign nation that owns our debt to like call upon it.
Right.
I don't think that would happen because of how economically, even with the quote unquote trade war, we're still massively economically tied and entwined with China. They wouldn't just do that.
Right.
And as far as governing, it's okay to have debt as long as other assets are strong. But like you said, I think that eventually we're gonna have to cut spending somewhere. Then people aren't going to want to do it in the military. People aren't going to want to do it in healthcare, and it might be things that we don't really think about that gets cut in the wayside that shouldn't necessarily be cut. Or it's we have to at least stop spending things stupidly like this farmer bailout that was ill planned and ill timed and kind of a band-aid on a larger wound. I don't know.
completely.
There's a lot of, I mean, yeah, I think Democrat and Republican have to have a serious talk about government spending, and it seems like they just did, but they came to the conclusion that it's okay to keep spending.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're already seeing cuts in things we don't even notice. I mean, from air traffic control, plane safety, what else?
Cuts to the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
Yes, yes, exactly. The FDA,
Yes.
like it's those day to day things in life that we're going to start losing. It's the things that you just rely on inside of a democracy, and I think those are the things that we would lose. And then comes Social Security. You know,
Yeah.
so I think we need to have a serious talk about this. You're right. You're
Yeah.
definitely right.
But perhaps it's only going to happen in a different political climate.
Right, right.
Sadly.
I agree. So I want to turn to international for just a minute. Um,
Absolutely.
looks like our neighbor to the east is
Ye,
shaking up events.
ye old Boris Johnson.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, yeah, I think Boris Johnson being the next prime minister of the UK is a very fitting final chapter on this chaotic Brexit story. He was one of the biggest proponents of Brexit, and I think he sums up the misinformed globalist, like anti-globalist nationalist view. And so it's kind of fitting that he's going to have to be the one that actually, I guess, leaves the EU without a deal.
Yeah, he definitely seems hell bent on getting a, a conclusion to this fiasco. But it seems like that conclusion is going to be a no deal Brexit with hard borders in Ireland, and a lot of issues with the EU. I don't know, man. I think the guy's just, first of all, I think he's just funny. Like in
Me
a
too.
weird way, he's a goofball. Like in a bad, not on purpose. I think he wants to be taken seriously, but he's a total goofball. He's got weird hair. He's had gaffes where he gets stuck on zip lines over London, and like he's just kind of a goofball guy. Um, and I think the first thing I want to address is just how undemocratically the prime minister is chosen, because the prime
Yes.
minister is chosen by the party in power, and that's only like 137,000 voters in that party that choose the prime minister, and you have something like only 9,000 of which that were able to choose the prime minister live in Scotland, which is a huge part of the UK. So there's definitely an issue with representation that I think some people are feeling in the UK, where they're like, I didn't vote for Boris Johnson. I didn't even have a chance to vote for Boris Johnson. It was the party controlled choosing their prime minister, and now he's the head.
That's a very good point, and I think as Americans, a lot of people don't understand how that works, and I do just want to say that I think actually a lot of people, like going off of what you said about he was really not elected in a democratic manner, there's a lot of people call him the British Trump, and I think that comes with the connotation of being kind of a buffoon that's just a bowling ball, a wrecking ball, excuse me. And I actually think that this whole scenario shows that Johnson, I think, is a formidable politician. And I think that's how he was able to do this. You're right. He has many baffles, issues, scandals, and bad press moments. But I think that he strategically did this. And I think a lot of people don't talk about how formidable he is as a politician. And I think he's a lot smarter than Trump, to be completely honest.
You're right. You're right, and I'm glad you said that, because I do have to kind of check myself, because I definitely don't want to underestimate someone, because you're right. People that come off of buffoons can end up being the leaders of global powers. I mean,
Right.
you don't just stumble your way into becoming the prime minister of the UK. He obviously did something right, and he was mayor of London too. So I mean, mayor of London is
Right.
mayor of a massive international cosmopolitan city.
Right.
Um, so
Yeah, because yeah, totally. And I sorry, I think it's just because he looks like Trump a little bit and he acts like Trump, but sometimes the shoe doesn't fit, And I was listening to Fareed Zakaria on CNN, and I think his GPS show on Sundays is one of the best. And he brought on a British diplomat he called himself frenemies with Boris Johnson. And he basically said that a lot of people are underestimating how smart this guy is. He's really not like Trump. He went to Oxford. He was a journalist. Yes, he definitely had some fake news stories. But you're right. He was the mayor of London. So he actually has a political career and political experience. And that's the big difference.
Yeah, and he understands he understands how unpopular he is right now, because I'm just reading now that the BBC is reporting that Boris Johnson wants a renewal of ties that bind the UK. Right? He understands that people in Scotland and Wales, which are way more progressive and less associated with the Tory party, he knows that they're not. He's not popular in those areas. So he said that he's announcing 300 million pounds, right? Pounds, not euros, right? Because it's not the UK.
Right, pounds. Uh-huh.
300 million pounds for new funding for Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. I don't know what that funding is. He hasn't gotten into details, but he's obviously trying to fix fix the issues that are kind of crackling in the UK, and he wants to bring people together. So you're right. He knows where he stands right now, and he's trying to better his position.
Oh, completely. And I mean, I just think it's going to be very difficult. In less than 100 days, he wants Britain to confirm their exit from the EU. And I just see that likely being a no deal. It's just, and that won't be good for Europe, the United States, or Britain.
No, it won't. It won't.
Yeah, I just wanted to read, if you'll bear with me, just 2 sentences from The Economist, who obviously is a center-right British newspaper, who have been very critical of Brexit from the beginning. And this is actually from a year ago, but I think it still stands true. It's likely to be disorderly. EU and WTO rules would require customs inspections and tariffs on much bilateral trade, which would cause long queues at Dover and disrupt just-in-time supply chains, as well as imposing a hard border in Ireland. Britain would fall out of EU regulatory bodies for things like air safety, medicines, nuclear materials, food, and car inspection, and would not have time to create new regulations. This means aircraft might not be allowed to fly, and radioisotopes for cancer treatments might not be imported. That sounds fun.
Yeah, that sounds terrible. That sounds terrible. And especially with no deal like that. Yeah, that's all very happened. I mean, I always worry about Ireland. My ancestry comes from Ireland and Scotland, and it does scare me because it was not that long ago that there was serious violence in Ireland and Northern Ireland. And I would hate to see any kind of violence start to spark up again because of a hard border. There's a lot of economic reasons, and there's a lot of real human life reasons that Brexit can really mess people up. It's a shame.
I definitely agree.
It's a shame, and especially it's a shame that I have a hunch that if you redid that vote for Brexit, I don't think people in the UK would vote to leave again. I think a lot of people have realized how much of a circus it's become, and I think they would vote differently.
Yeah, I mean, Nigel Farage ran a brilliant Brexit campaign. The media campaign behind it was impressive, and I think he is a genius in forms of political media, and I think that's what Brexit was, just a kind of a media lie, that fake news, actually, if we want to use the right term. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, the people being duped.
Yes. So I mean, and we were talking last week, the economy is too good. And I think Brexit would be that nail in the coffin to send the global economy into a recession.
Yeah, I think it would be the first card in the house of cards that starts to really fall. It's like the U.S.-China trade war. If that continues to get worse, that's another card. And you have those two cards together, you're right. I think the global economy could take a serious hit.
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of wanted to close this episode just with a couple minutes. I just wanted to share a book I finished yesterday that I thought was pretty fascinating, and I think it's really relevant to what's going on right now. So yesterday I read Jared Diamond's new book, Upheaval: Turning Points for Nations in Crisis. And it's by Jared Diamond, who I think is a genius. He did Guns, Germs, and Steel and Collapse. And Diamond does a comparative analysis of how 6 nations have dealt with recent upheaval and crises. He discusses how many of these nations came out of the crisis by accepting responsibility and actually using a more personal approach to getting their country and economy out of it. And of the 6 cases, 2 really stood out to me, and it was Indonesia and Chile. In Chile, the right-wing military generals overthrew the left democratic government of President Allende on September 11th in 1973. The economy had been awful, unemployment was high, and actually most of the population accepted that this was going to happen because they thought it would only be for about 2 years while new elections were held. Instead, Pinochet, the general that helped orchestrate the coup and luckily got the job as the leader, ruled for 17 years in which he tortured and killed rivals. In Indonesia, the other one I talked about, the leftist government of Indonesia's founding leader, Sukarno, I'm probably going to butcher that name, tried to arm leftists for a coup, but he was crushed by the right-wing military generals in a counter-coup. Suharto, don't get it confused with the first guy, became the second leader of Indonesia, and he ruled for 31 years and was known as a violent tyrant because his purge of Indonesian communists resulted in almost 500,000 people dying. What scares me in these two cases, and that's why I'm bringing this up at the end of this episode, is that many moderate and educated people accepted both of these as necessary because the economy was doing well and they were working with the US and Europe for economic help. Diamond ends the book looking towards the problems that may face the US, and he says that the US has better institutions than Chile or Indonesia, but it could suffer similar issues when political compromise breaks down. The right ended up going after and killing opponents in both these countries after compromise on both sides had ended. I just want to leave our listeners thinking about the importance of political compromise. The US is not in the same state as Chile before the coup, but we have lost the ability to talk to one another. And I think all political violence and civil war begins when we stop talking to one another. So I just wanted to say that as ending for this. Yeah.
Well said. Well said. And with that, folks, that'll conclude this episode of the Tonic Accord podcast. Again, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, Apple, iTunes podcasts, and we're still working on Spotify. I think we need a couple more episodes, and then we can get approved by Spotify. So keep an eye out for those things. Give us any sort of feedback you want. We want to hear it all. Leave a comment, shoot us an email. And we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.